If you've ever wanted to see what the journey to wealth looks like, check out the 3 buckets by age.
Brian, I am so excited about this one because this is one that people ask us about all the time. They say, guys, I understand that you talk about these 3 buckets. You tell me that as I build for financial independence, I want to have 3 distinct tax buckets. I want to have my tax-free, my tax-deferred, and my after-tax. But how do I do it? And when do I do it? And how do I know that I'm doing it right? And where should I focus based on stage in life? We want to answer those questions for you today.
Yeah, and this is so important. We even built it into our net worth tool because in addition to the power that comes from just tracking your net worth as it grows year over year, it's important to know how your assets, your investable assets are actually split up because this not only impacts how you pull the money out in retirement, it impacts what your current taxes are while you're in the accumulation stage. It's just great to kind of know where do you fall with the 3 buckets. And what I like about what we're going to do today, Bo, is that we're not only going to go through the 3 buckets, we're going to talk about what it looks like by decade.
That's right.
From a behavioral standpoint. And this is something that when we came up with this, I was like, this is going to be brilliant because from 20 all the way to 40, this reflected me.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about, we did a case study on Manny the Mutant. And what I think is so cool for any of you who've ever wondered, what is a person who doesn't make 6 figures right out of the gates? How do they build wealth? How does this actually look? We're going to follow a financial mutant and actually see this. And like I said, this reflects exactly the way my walk towards wealth felt like from age 20 all the way up to age 40.
So if you're someone who's not tracking this, you're not actually looking to see how your buckets are broken down, I would encourage you, go download the net worth tool. Go to learn.moneyguy.com. And as you start tracking your annual net worth, we will actually show you the buckets right there where you can see them front and center. Because if you start focusing on this, it's amazing how your mind will start adjusting in terms of how you make your financial decisions. So we're going to walk through this. But before we kind of walk through each of the decades, Brian, I think it makes sense for us to lay out the assumptions we're going to do through our case study, because we're going to have a case study that's going to carry through the entire show. So here is the groundwork. Here's the what you need to know. We're going to do a case study on Manny the Mutant. And Manny's going to start investing 25% at age 25. And Manny's going to save all the way from the time that he's 25 all the way out until 65. We're going to assume that when Manny starts his career at age 25, he starts with a starting salary of $50,000 a year, no bonuses, no additional compensation, and then every year he gets a 5% pay raise. So from age 25 all the way out to 65, he's getting a pay raise. We're also going to assume that he follows the financial order of operations to a T. Brian, can you show him the financial order of operations real quick?
I love to show it.
He follows the food to a T. So you're going to see why we built it the way that we built it, why the steps exist at each stage where they exist. We're also going to assume that he works for a generous employer who offers a match. So if Manny puts 6% into his 401k, he's going to get a 3% employer match all throughout his working life. And then we're going to assume that Manny's going to prioritize a Roth 401k over the pre-tax until his marginal tax bracket crosses from the 25% over to the 30% federal tax bracket. We didn't factor in state income tax, so we're assuming no state income tax in the state that Manny lives in. We're also going to assume that he can use the backdoor Roth strategy, but he does not have the ability to do mega backdoor Roth. So he is a very normal American worker. He's starting with a reasonable salary, reasonable pay raises. He's going to save 25% of his gross income, and he's going to follow the FOO when he thinks about building towards financial independence.
Obviously, to speed things up, we assume that Manny the Mutant is starting off at step 5 of the financial order of operations. Already has his emergency reserves queued up, already is working through that. We covered that he's getting the free money from his employer, but a lot of this is going to go from the behavioral steps of steps 5, 6, and 7 of the financial order of operations.
All right, Brian, so let's jump right in. Let's start in the 20s. Let's think about your 3-bucket strategy, how you ought to be approaching that in your 20s. And we think that there is one bucket that you should be so excited about. Because right now, in this decade, this bucket can be super fuel for your financial wealth building.
Yeah, if you want to get any financial mutant excited, and really get them just in a froth is talk about tax-free growth. Can you become a tax-free millionaire? Roth accounts make this possible, and that's why you're going to start your journey. When we talk about the 3 buckets, let's prioritize those Roth tax-free growth opportunities.
And even if you can't max them out, just start somewhere. For most folks, when we get them excited about saving, we say, hey, if all you can do is $20 a month, great, open a Roth IRA, do $20 a month, $50, $100. It does not matter the number. Why do we love Roth IRAs? Well, one reason is you get to choose the custodian that you use. So you can use like a Fidelity or a Vanguard or a Charles Schwab, really low expenses, really low fees if you choose a low-cost provider.
Yeah, the other thing I think is great is that the tax-free growth also leads itself to when you get to the distribution phase, it's also tax-free. So this is going to be one of those things when we talk about how do you pull your money out in retirement, this is probably the last basket you're going to pull out of because it's also a great legacy builder as well. So there's nothing wrong with that tax-free growth opportunity.
We also know that if you choose one of those solid low-cost providers like Fidelity, you have a large selection of investments. Different than your 401k where you have a captive selection of investments. You can go out there and choose which target retirement index fund, choose which low-cost index fund, choose which investment you want to use. So you get to pick from the entire universe of investments inside of Roth IRAs.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about specifically Roth IRAs, your Roth 401ks, and other things. You have flexibility of contributions. When you have lots of opportunity these days with the way the government is set up, these different opportunities, you can save for tax-free growth no matter what your income is, no matter where you are in age. This is a great opportunity, especially for those in their 20s who have decades to let that money grow and compound.
Now, Roth assets are not the only tax-free assets available to you. You also have the ability to contribute to a health savings account, assuming that you're in a high deductible health plan. You have to be covered by a high deductible plan in order to contribute. But this is yet another area where you can build your tax-free bucket.
Yeah, this is part of that dynamic duo of step number 5 of the financial order of operations, that tax-free growth. We love HSAs because they're triple tax advantage. What do we mean when we talk about triple tax? We're talking about tax deduction on the contribution. Number 2, we're talking about assets grow tax deferred, meaning you don't pay taxes every year as the money goes up or it has income distributions. It's tax deferred. And then if you use it for medical purposes, for health care and other things, it is actually distributed completely tax-free. Now, Bo, there's actually a bonus category. We talk about triple tax advantage, but here at Abound Wealth, we actually have taken advantage of the Quattro opportunity. What is that 4th bonus chance?
Yeah, if you work with an employer that will allow you to do salary deferrals into your HSA, those contributions are not subject to payroll FICA taxes. So it's another level of tax advantage. So if you have the ability to do HSA, if you can payroll deduct your HSA and you're a young person in your 20s, you may really want to put some attention into this strategy because it can be huge for you down the road.
So most 20-year-olds, you're going to load up on the tax-free stuff, but let's move to the next column or the next bucket. That's the tax deferred. Now look, this one probably going to have a lot of contributions other than getting that free money from your employer, because I realize with the new tax legislation, there's a good opportunity that potentially all of your money could be tax-free, but under general rules and the way people typically don't change that fast, probably the lion's share of people, your employer match is still going to go in that tax-deferred bucket. Now, what that means is that while the money grows, every year when your employer puts that matching money or that profit-sharing money into the retirement account, every year as it grows, you're not going to pay taxes, but it's only tax deferred, not tax free, because when you do pull it out as a distribution in retirement, you will pay ordinary income taxes on this bucket.
And Brian, you already mentioned this. This bucket may not be growing a lot in your 20s, but that's okay. And there's a chance that the reason it's not growing is even if you are doing your 401k, in your 20s, you're likely in a lower tax bracket. So Roth 401k may be the thing that makes sense for you, which is actually building your tax-free bucket, not your tax-deferred bucket. But again, that's okay. All right, Brian, let's talk about the 3rd bucket, the after-tax bucket. This one, I feel like people in their 20s, they get caught up on this one because they want it so bad, but I'm just not positive in your 20s is where you should be focusing on this bucket.
Now remember, we are past emergency reserves. We're focusing this show primarily on step 5 and beyond for the financial order of operations, but your after-tax is where your emergency reserves and other things. But when we're talking about after-tax for investments, marketable investments like mutual funds, index funds, and so forth. This bucket probably is not getting a lot of attention because there's just so many opportunity on the tax favored side of things that this is probably the last tier that you're going to be looking at unless you're a way overachiever and you can blow past 25% and you can look here at that point.
Now, in your 20s, what you need to focus on is the discipline, because it's easy for TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and social media to force us to look in the wrong direction. So make sure you understand where your guardrails are. Even though opening up that Acorns account or trading the options or doing that thing might seem sexy, don't go out of order of the financial order of operations. You're going to see in our case study that it was built for a reason. So make sure you're following the financial order of operations in your 20s, because it is supposed to show you how you can maximize your dollars on your wealth building journey.
I know you heard the sound, but just to make sure I repeat this, if you go to moneyguy.com/resources, we do have this free deliverable you too can download. If you need to have an accelerated path, you want to go ahead and just capture all the information as fast as possible, go to learn.moneyguy.com. We actually have a course on the financial order of operations as well.
All right, Brian, so let's go back to our case study. Let's revisit Manny. Again, I want to remind you that here are the assumptions. Manny starts investing 25% at age 25, and he saves until he's 65. He makes $50,000 a year, and he gets raises of 5% per year. No other income, no bonuses, nothing like that. He follows the financial order of operations step by step by step, and he gets an employer match of 3% if he puts 6% into his 401k. So he starts doing this at age 25. Well, by the time that Manny gets to age 29, look at this. His income at 29 has grown now to $60,775. But because he has been diligently saving for that 4-year period leading up to age 29, he now has almost $91,000 in his investment portfolio.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that the lion's share of this is tax-free, obviously, because he's loading up that Roth IRA. He's doing the 401k and tax-free contributions as well. It's amazing. Now, look, there's nothing in the after-tax, but is tax deferred? That's the employer, that matching money, that free money from the employer. Of the $90,000 or close to $91,000, close to $11,000 of that is from the employer. And it's really interesting to me because this is a person that's only been saving and investing well below 10 years. I mean, we're talking 4 or 5 years since he waited until 25 to start investing. It's already exceeded almost 1.5 times his income, making $60,000 now worth over 90. That's pretty incredible how fast money can stack up.
I think people are amazed to see this, that just starting out on your journey, just by being a consistent and disciplined saver, you can build to 6 figures relatively quickly. Another thing we want to show you is Manny is on a path. He's on what we call the journey to abundance. Again, if you have our net worth tool, you're familiar with this, but we want to show you where you are. Are you an average accumulator of wealth? Are you a prodigious accumulator of wealth? Well, you can see from the time that Manny started at 25 all the way now until 29, he has now surpassed the average accumulator of wealth. He is above average from a saving standpoint, working towards being a prodigious accumulator of wealth. If you're not tracking this, go download the net worth tool, learn.moneyguy.com, and you can follow your journey to abundance just like Manny.
Yeah, we just took some screenshots from the actual tool. What I find interesting is that I think a lot of us who come from humble beginnings, we get this goal that we want to hit 7 figures. We want to be millionaires, but there's so many steps in between that. I want you to take the chance to celebrate, because Manny the Mutant, let's face it, he had to first start from zero, get to 50,000. Well, truthfully, 10,000, then get to 50,000. At 90,000 at age 29, really, really close to crossing into 6-figure status with 100,000. That's going to be another one that you'll probably pour over ice, whatever your favorite beverage is. These are celebrations. Don't focus on something that seems so big like 7 figures. Start with the first $10,000. Start with getting to 6 figures by a certain age. All these things will start building upon themselves, and you'll see it's easier and easier to go if you can just focus on what small incremental decision you can make today to start the journey.
All right, Brian, let's now talk about the 30s. Okay, in our 30s, life changes a little bit. We still have tons of time, to continue building wealth, tons of opportunity. But man, life gets messy. I am living this right now. It is a messy stage of life because what happens in our 30s is our commitments increase. We start a family, we get married, we start a family, we buy the house, we have job commitments, we have community commitments, we have all this stuff going on, and yet our disposable income goes lower and lower and lower and lower because all of these things start pulling on us. So in our 30s, it's easy, frankly, for us to just take our eyes off the ball.
Yeah, we internally, we call this the Reby slide, and it's because it's the messy middle, and I love it because it's so true. In the 20s, you're going to look at your life and go, how in the world, what was I spending all my time doing? Because as soon as the kids start showing up, you're like, whoa, my commitments are way up here, but yet my disposable income, yes, I'm making more money, but it seems like there's a lot more stuff pulling at your purse, pulling at your wallet. It's just, there's so many things. That's why we call it the messy middle. Don't get discouraged. I get it. It's hard, but you still have so many decades. If you can just stay committed, if you can stay disciplined and really focus on still powering and persevering through this stage of your life, you will be greatly, greatly rewarded. And that's what we want to cover with the 3 buckets and how you should focus on that.
So in your 30s, there's a chance that your tax-free bucket will be changing a little bit because, again, for most folks, your income increases in your 30s as you continue progressing along in your career. So maybe you cross above the income threshold where you can't directly contribute to a Roth IRA anymore. Now that's a good thing. Generally speaking, making more money is better than making less money. If you're curious, the income phase outs for 2023 are between $138,000 and $153,000 for single individuals, $218,000 to $228,000 for married. If you're over those income limits, you may not be able to put money directly into your Roth anymore, but there is a backdoor strategy. There is a way, if you have the correct account structure, that you can continue to build your tax-free bucket. So don't just think because you're making more money, you have to give up on this bucket now.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where a very small group, majority of you are still going to use tax-free both on your employer plan as well as with your Roth IRA, whether it's normal contributions or backdoor. But there are a portion of you who go be financial mutants. Maybe you go beyond and you have to do tax deferred, but we'll get into that second. The big thing I want to focus on is health savings accounts. As we talked about, messy middle means you might be having children, your family's expanding. We love health savings accounts because of that triple tax advantage, but there's a problem with them is that they are attached to, required to be attached to a high deductible health plan. That works great if you have no need to go pull off of your health insurance because you realize with a high deductible plan, the reason the government gives you all these incentives is you have to cover the majority of your medical expenses out of either what you contribute to the health savings account or just out of after-tax dollars. It might make sense while you have a growing family. Really pay attention on an annual basis. What are your plans? Because maybe the year that you are having a growing family, you're having a new baby come into the household like you have in the past year, Bo. Pay attention to, should you go more to that Cadillac insurance where it has low deductibles, doesn't qualify for health savings accounts, but gives you a lot more benefits for your premium dollars.
So again, you have to make sure, even though we love tax-free bucket, it's not tax-free at the cost of everything. So in your 30s, you need to assess this because what's probably going to happen is the tax-deferred bucket is going to get more of your attention. This is likely going to become a much bigger planning tool in your 30s because one of the absolute best legal ways to hide money from the government is through an employer-sponsored retirement plan. And you get to choose, do I want to hide the money now in terms of doing it pre-tax, or do I want to hide the money later in terms of doing Roth? Well, in your 30s, you have to make the determination, which one makes the most sense? Do I keep doing the Roth 401k bucket? Am I in the tax bracket that substantiates that? Or do I need to shift my contributions over to pre-tax?
Yeah, this is definitely that decade where if you're especially in your late 30s, you start hitting a lick with your income. You will want to start paying attention to, if you add the federal, the state, and you're well above 30% on the taxes you're paying, you're going, maybe I need the deduction now. Why is that important? And the reason I always share this is that realize the goal is that when you retire, at some point you won't have earned income anymore, which is your biggest income generator that's taxed. Well, if you're now living off of your assets and you have the 3-bucket strategy, there's an opportunity, especially with the way they keep pushing required minimum distributions higher and higher. We're at age 75 for a lot of you who are watching this now. You will have the opportunity to hopefully manipulate legally the tax code in retirement to take distributions, whether it's Roth conversions or just to take distributions for yourself at a much lower tax bracket, even if tax rates go up. I just have this feeling, and this is something you have to make an assumption on. Nobody knows. Nobody has the crystal ball. The government and elected officials are always scared of older people because they vote. So they incentivize a lot of benefits for retirees, whether it's your state taxation is not deductible on Social Security or your pensions or your retirement distributions. Pay attention to all that stuff. That's how we can build up this fact that once you get to a higher income, it might make more sense to take the income benefit now because you think that there's going to be a benefit for taking it at a lower tax rate in the future.
So again, focus on that because there's a chance, even in your 30s, you might start saving in your taxable account in your 30s. You might move to step 7. You want to show them the financial order?
Oh, yeah,
you might move to hyperaccumulation. You might be moving into that in your 30s, but it's not a given. You want to make sure that you continue to stay true to the financial order of operations. And again, it's okay if this bucket isn't growing yet. Now, if you're someone who's part of the FIRE movement and you're thinking you want to exit the workforce inside of your 40s or in your early 50s, yeah, maybe you need to adjust. But for the majority of folks who are building, there's a good chance that even in your 30s, after-tax bucket is not going to get a lot of love.
Yeah, there's still a lot of incentives in the tax code to save in those tax-free and those tax-deferred accounts. Don't worry, in your 40s, you're going to have a chance to load it up in that after-tax account, but make sure it has a time and a place. Bo, let's check in once again with Manny the Mutant. I'd love to see, because think about this. 20s, he had less than a decade. He only had 4 to 5 years to start saving and investing. Now Manny has been at this for going on close to 14, 15 years. What does it look like now?
Yeah, let's review our assumptions really quick. He started investing at the age of 25, saving 25% of his gross income. He's going to do that all the way until 65. He started his career at 25, making $50,000 a year, and he gets 5% pay raises each year. He follows the financial order of operations. He understands what to do with his next dollar, and he gets an employer match. If he puts in 6%, he gets a 3% employer match. Look at this. By the time he gets to the end of his 30s, at the end of this decade, his income has now grown to almost $100,000 a year. His final income at age 39 is $98,997. I'm going to call that $100,000 a year. But look at his portfolio. He has accumulated almost $530,000.
Yeah, imagine the part that's exciting to me is close to $500,000 of that is tax-free.
Tax-free.
I mean, he is well on his path to being a 7-figure tax-free millionaire. That's incredible. So this is the part, and like I said, started at 25. This is not the 20-year-old that we talk about 88 times over, or 21-year-old. This is somebody who waited until age 25 to start.
That's right.
But you can see Manny is well on his way to becoming a tax-free millionaire, to becoming a 7-figure millionaire with all of their investments in their 40s, but just being diligent, making it through the first 10,000, then 50,000, past 100,000. Now he's over $500,000. Lots of opportunities to celebrate for Manny the Mutant.
And again, I want to remind you, Manny didn't start a business. He didn't figure out something crazy. He just was consistent in his saving. In his 30s, he's maxing out his Roth IRA. He's maxing out his HSA. And he's putting more into his Roth 401k, but do you realize at this point, he still has not maxed out his Roth. He's still not hit $22,500 in the Roth 401k portion. He's just doing the stuff that's available to most of us. And he's still not even doing the pre-tax. He's still doing the Roth side, not building the after-tax. I think it's amazing that here he is at age 39, over $500,000. It's incredible. So let's look at his journey to abundance, Brian. Remember, at 29, he'd accumulated almost $91,000. Here, a decade later, $530,000. well on his way to being a prodigious accumulator of wealth. If you're not using this tool, if this is not something you've seen, go download it, learn.moneyguy.com. Start tracking your net worth so you can see your journey to abundance visualized.
I think it's pretty amazing that you can see here look at the ages. 25 is when he started, crossed over the average accumulator of wealth. By the time he was right before he reached 30.
Before 30, yep.
And now look at it, he's very much on the path to intersecting with the prodigious accumulator of wealth, right as he's getting into his 40s. That's pretty amazing to see this thing gaining traction. Remember, we think linear. Your investments will think in a compounding. That's why we're always saying make sure you're maximizing compounding growth opportunities. Manny's rocking it. And you too can do this. And remember, Bo's already hit this. He didn't invent something. He didn't have to go take some crazy risk and start a business. This is just if you take the three ingredients, discipline, taking that discipline and turning it into margin that goes into income and assets that get invested and turn into your army of dollars, that then you give it the component of time, you too can be Manny the Mutant.
And I think, and also, I want to point out, Manny is not out there trying to find the next latest and greatest investment. We're assuming very conservative rate of returns. We assumed that age 25, he was making 9.5%. And then at age 26, 9.4, and then 9.3, and then 9.2, and then 9.1. And it's going to continue to decrease as this portfolio gets more and more and more conservative through time. We think that these are incredibly realistic expectations that very likely could reflect your journey as well. All right, Brian, let's talk about the next decade. This is a fun one. Let's talk about the 40s.
Yeah, we've graduated from the messy middle. Now you're in your 40s, and I've shared this, but I think it's worth repeating. I'm in this decade. I'm closing out my journey in this decade, and what I find interesting is this is the first decade I felt like I could breathe a little bit. I don't mind sharing. I felt somewhat constricted or poor in my 20s and 30s, and I think it's because I practice what's called forced scarcity, where I have squeezed myself every year when I got pay raises. I was trying to definitely focus on adding more dollars because I had that conversation with my wife that if we could save really hard between our 20s and 40s, we could potentially come off the accelerator of savings in our 40s to live that life, that great big beautiful tomorrow. This is when you get your dividends. This is when you get your roses and payoff for all the sacrifice in previous decades, and we'll see that with Manny the Mutant in a minute as well.
Okay, so let's talk about each of the three buckets. First, on the tax-free side in your 40s, it's likely that you're kind of locked in there. If you've been doing Roth IRA contributions, you're probably still doing them. If you were backdoor Roth eligible, you're probably doing the backdoor. Likely your children are getting older, so the health insurance plan that you've been on is probably the one you're going to stay on. So you are probably already doing the tax-free things that you know you want to be doing in your 40s. This should not be new to you. This should not be something that you were just discovering and uncovering for the very first time.
Yeah, and this is also, I will tell you, this is partially where you are transitioning from tax-free to tax-deferred on your employer plan. If you're somebody, because you think about the way our tax code's written, you go from the 24% all the way up to, was it 32%? Yep. So, I mean, you'll see the government has set the tax code up very quickly to go beyond that 25 to 30% gray zone area. So if you're in one of those higher income situations, this is the decade. You probably will be transitioning from doing Roth contributions in your employer plan to that tax deferred to take advantage of your current year deductions.
And so what happens is, because of that, your tax-deferred account is likely going to start becoming a pretty decent size here in your 40s. You do shift those contributions. Maybe you are moving towards maxing out those salary deferral limits. Right now, it's $22,500 for someone in their 40s. So you're able to start seeing these accounts really start to grow in your 40s. So you will likely see some substantial growth there, but there's a cautionary tale.
Yeah, I do want to caution, because a lot of you financial mutants out there, you're so excited about the tax benefits, because tax-free, there's a huge benefit in that tax-free growth. Tax-deferred, huge tax benefit in the fact that you get a current year tax deduction. But there is a problem. There is too much of a good thing, because I have run into cases where people will come talk to us and they were ready to buy a car. And they've done, and this is people who make great incomes, have great net worth statements, but when it comes to how do you pay cash for the nice luxury car, because maybe you're at step 8 of the financial order of operations. Well, if you've loaded up all of your tax favored accounts, you probably
can't
don't
get to
have
it.
any money in after tax other than your emergency reserves. That gets to be a problem. And for all my people who are also part of the FIRE movement, you think you're going to be leaving the workforce not at 65, not even at 60. You better have a plan to figure out how you're going to have that after-tax account. So just be careful. I don't want you to be loaded up where where you're retirement rich, but your current life is very poor because you're just constricted on what assets you actually have access to.
That's exactly right. And we're going to talk a little about how that manifests for Manny and why Manny made the decision to continue sticking to the financial order of operations. But before we do that, the after-tax bucket in your 40s is likely something that begins to take shape because it does exactly what you just said, Brian. It provides a bridge of liquidity if you're looking to do things like buy a car, buy a second home, have a purchase, or if you're looking to retire early. If you think that there's a really good chance you're going to leave the workforce before 59 and a half, or especially before age 55, it's costly to get to your dollars. And so that third bucket, that after-tax bucket, is going to be the one that you need to build up so that you have liquidity, so that you can actually pay for your living expenses in retirement.
Yeah, and that's why, remember, step 7 of financial order of operations, hyperaccumulation, is where the 3-bucket strategy really does come into focus. If you need easy access to assets because you're leaving the workforce early, do not overlook the value of step number 7 of the financial order of operations.
All right, Brian, let's go back to Manny. Now remember, here's what Manny's doing. He started at 25, investing 25% of his gross income. And he said, I'm going to work until I'm 65. So Manny was not a member of the FIRE movement. Manny is not trying to exit the workforce in his 40s and 50s. So because of that, he's making specific decisions around how he accumulates. We'll talk about that in a moment. He made $50,000 a year at age 25, and he's been getting 5% pay raises each year. He's continued to follow the financial order of operations, and if he puts 6% in his 401k, his employer will put 3%, and he is investing conservatively. We assumed 9.5% rate of return at 25, 9.4 at 26, 9.3, so on and so on and so on. So the rate of return is getting lower and lower and lower as his investment portfolio becomes more conservative. Well, check this out. By the end of his 40s, by the end of this decade, his income has now grown to $161,000. Again, that's just 5% pay raises, but look at what happened to his portfolio.
Yeah, I think it's so amazing because a lot of people, this is something that's not published or talked about a ton, is what age do people become 7-figure millionaires? It happens in your 40s.
That's exactly
A lot
right.
of the research shows it's about 27 years after you graduate college, so age 49. And I think Manny is no exception to this rule. When we were looking at the numbers behind the scenes, it was right around the age of 45 that Manny, who started at age 25, so essentially 20 years in the future of just being diligent and disciplined and saving out of his paycheck every month, has created this. And look, and he's a tax-free millionaire.
That's
Close
right.
to $1.5 million of this is in Roth tax-free type accounts. How cool is his retirement going to be that he gets to pull that money out and control his destiny in a completely tax-free way? If you look at the buckets, the free money from his employer, as well as if he's getting to the point of transitioning into tax deferred, it's still a small portion, $193,000 out of the 1.6 to 1.7 million. And then the after tax, only $22,000, because it is probably the last bucket you get to put money into because you're still trying to maximize all the tax benefits that the government has laid out for us to incentivize you to build for the future.
Yeah, it's really interesting. He's still, because again, his income has increased. It's gone from $50,000 at 25 to now at 49, $160,000. But if we assume the current limits that are in place today, he's still maxing out his Roth IRA. He's probably doing the backdoor at this point, maybe depending on his tax return. He's maxing out his HSA. He is contributing a modest amount to his after-tax account, but he's still doing Roth 401k. He's still building up that Roth bucket, even at age 49, because he's following the food to a T. So if you think about this and you look at his journey to abundance, he is now a prodigious accumulator of wealth. He has now moved from at age 39 having a $530,000 portfolio, now at age 49, now getting into the good stuff, almost a multimillionaire, almost $1.7 million inside of his investment portfolio. This picture is starting to get really, really exciting.
As a person in my late 40s, And and when you hang out with your neighbors and you're having a few adult beverages and you start talking about and just do what I do for a living, people will come up and talk to you and be like, when the market's making money, like, did you see how much accounts are going up right now? I mean, people really do have these type of discussions, and I wish that 49-year-old Manny could go talk to 29-year-old Manny, who because 29-year-old Manny had an account that was not even worth $100,000, and say, 29-year-old Manny, if you will just stay the course, just keep doing what you're doing, your account will not be worth $500,000 like it was when you're 39. It's going to be worth 1.6, close to 1.7 million if you'll just stay the course by the time you're 49 years of age. Guys, this is the way it works. He's also crossed the threshold of a prodigious accumulator of wealth. That happened in his 40s as well. All you do is stay the course. Don't let the distractions of the world and the financial media and everybody else telling you what you should be spending your money on, because we live in this, YOLO life and decade of consumption. No, you just stay the course, and you too will be able to look back and go, how did I get here?
Yep.
I mean, it really is the most incredible journey. And that's why, remember, we pulled this right off of our net worth tool. If you go to learn.moneyguy.com, you too can start this journey. Just start small incremental decisions, just like Manny did. And you'll look back in a few decades and go, whoa, this is what I'm talking about. This is true wealth building. Doesn't matter where you come from, humble beginnings, they don't care. Success, money, just let the money do the hard work. Your army of dollar bills can make this that easy.
And you got to believe that at 49, remember, Manny's plan, he wants to work all the way till 65, but at 49, he's got to be thinking, all right, I'm starting to have some options. That means that now, as I transition into my 50s and beyond, I need to be strategic about what I want my life to look like, because that's what happens in these decades. If you've been doing the things that you were supposed to be doing, if you've been following the food, making the hard decisions, focusing on discipline, focusing on saving, then you get to really start optimizing at this stage. Then at this stage, you get to start fine-tuning and talking about what does chapter 2.0 of my life look like.
Yeah, because you are now, you get to own your time. A lot of us, we go work because we have to pay the bills, so we're trading our time for the resources. Now, I think when you get to this stage with the 3 buckets, you get to think about this in a completely different way. You own your time. You work only because of what it can do for you and because it brings you purpose. If you can get to that liberation point, it's going to be exciting. Let's talk about what that means from the 3 bucket strategy. The first thing, when you get to tax-free, when we do our annual wealth study of all of our millionaire clients, everyone, I'm talking about everyone, including myself. I mean, when I have been writing content on tax-free accounts, I will share with you how I've made a huge mistake, it's actually a very small dollar amount mistake, but it has big ramifications from a tax-free standpoint. Everyone's going to wish that their tax-free bucket was bigger.
But unfortunately, we can't go back in time. We can't go back and do that. So one of the things you ought to be thinking about in your 50s is, okay, are there going to be opportunities for me to increase this bucket before retirement? Meaning, are there things where, okay, I know what my plan looks like, I've stress tested it, I've put in the Monte Carlo. Maybe, even though I'm in a higher tax bracket, I need to shift from pre-tax to Roth. Or maybe I'm going to leave the workforce early enough that from the time that I retire until the time that I reach RMD age, whether that's 73 or whether that's 75, I'm going to be able to do some Roth conversions. I'm going to be able to start converting into that tax-free bucket. You really start to think about, man, I wish I had more of that. How can I get more of that? What are the things I can do at this stage to potentially impact that?
Yeah, and that's going to happen for anybody who leaves the workforce, or just, maybe you don't have to leave the workforce, but you just go from your high-paying job to something that, because you've now determined maybe you want to go teach or do something else that doesn't pay as much, but it drops you into a much lower tax bracket. From 50s all the way up to 75, when you have to start taking those required minimum distributions, you can work on how do I turn those tax-deferred assets into tax-free assets. It's a great planning opportunity.
So then you start thinking about your tax-deferred bucket, and likely this account has probably hit critical mass. It's grown to a point now where you're like, holy cow, I got a lot of money in that bucket, but you recognize it's great that I have a lot of money in that bucket, but that money is kind of expensive to access. So I better have a plan when I retire of where my dollars are going to come from. I know that if I just want to willy-nilly pull $1 out of my tax-deferred bucket, I'm going to have to pay 25%, 30% in federal taxes or state taxes. Maybe I want to be more strategic in how I'm allocating my buckets pre-retirement so that my money's not so expensive to get to.
And this is where the reward or the benefit for those that are 50 and beyond for following the financial order of operations. Because if you spend any time in step 7, the hyperaccumulation phase, and you knew you were going to leave the workforce pre-65, you will have after-tax assets. And that's the part where we practice what we, and remember, I come from a public accounting background. I call it the LIFO, meaning that the last bucket that you're going to fill up is that after tax, but that's probably going to be the first bucket you're going to pull money out of in retirement because it's a bridge account. It's the account that the government lets you have access to without much trouble. Now, look, yes, you could go get your basis out of your Roth IRA, but who wants to do that? Tax-free growth? I'm not going to prioritize that. That's going to be one of the last buckets. That's why, once again, it's LIFO. Last in, first out. Meanwhile, those Roth assets are going to keep building in the background.
That's exactly right. They are amazing for you. Well, the after-tax bucket's what's going to allow you to let those dollars continue to grow. It's not uncommon, Brian, for us to have clients with large 7-figure portfolios living off of 6-figure incomes and still paying in the lower tax brackets because they can pick and choose what their tax situation looks like. If you really want to be financially independent, one of the things that you get to be independent of is the current tax policy in place. You can pick and choose where you are pulling your dollar, so you get to choose how much you pay in taxes. So let's see how Manny plays out as he hits retirement, as he gets to retirement age. Remember, here are the assumptions. He started investing 25% at 25. He does that all the way until 65. He started making $50,000 a year at 25, and he gets 5% pay raises each year. He follows the financial order of operations to a T. He gets an employer match. If he puts in 6%, his employer puts in 3%, and his portfolio gets more conservative through time. He started at age 25 with a 9.5% rate of return. And by the time he gets to 65, it's dropped to a 5.5% rate of return. So more and more and more conservative. Look at what happens to Manny. He finishes his career with an income of $352,000. Now, immediately you guys are saying, oh my God, it's so much money. Oh, it's so high, it's so high, it's so high. If you factor in inflation, you think about a 3% on average inflation, that $351 when Manny is 65 is the equivalent of about $107,000 in today's dollars. So I don't think that's crazy. Someone finishing their career, making a 6-figure salary after they've been working for 40 years, I don't think seems that crazy.
Yeah, what I love is just seeing the compounding effect of this is that Manny now with having over $6 million in assets, think about the opportunities he is going to have for if you just want to do basic napkin financial planning. Look at safe withdrawal rates,
Absolutely.
4% or 4.5%. He's going to be able to replace pretty much all of his income that he is working income. That's powerful, powerful stuff, especially if you add in Social Security and other social safety net issues out there. Manny has done the hard work of being disciplined, putting that money to work, and then giving it the right amount of time. It is amazing how the small incremental decisions that 25-year-old Manny put into motion have now created where people are going to see Manny, the $6 million Manny, who's quickly headed towards Deca status in his life, of Deca millionaire status. And they're like, man, I'm sure this person had lots of opportunities and other things. They'll say all these things. Nobody ever realizes, no, what happened was a young Manny at age 25 started making those small decisions. This is the journey of the typical millionaire next door that you so hear about. But nobody ever celebrates this because we always see the end result. And it's only the people when you talk to millionaires. That's why when we do our wealth survey and other things where people actually tell you the inside, they open up the curtain to let you know how this journey actually gets created, that you find out, nope, it's just stacking it up dollar after dollar, those small incremental decisions. Whenever we do our wealth surveys, it's not that these people are the entrepreneurs. It's not that the majority of our clients are even the people who do something so well, the virtuoso that they get paid, the LeBrons and all those that are just born with a talent that does something so incredible. No, the majority, the lion's share of our millionaires come from just stacking up army of dollars on top of each other and build incredible fortunes that just happen from just being small decisions that lead to big exponential growth in the long term.
And why do we love the financial order of operations? Look at how great the math worked out. Brian, you already referenced this. At a 4% withdrawal rate, he has enough to replace 72% of his final income. Remember, he was saving 25%, right?
Yep.
So he's going to be able to maintain his lifestyle without even factoring in Social Security, without factoring in any of those types of things. When you add Social Security in, it's amazing what he's going to be able to do. So when you take a look at his journey to abundance, he's reached it. He has now reached the level where money is not an issue. He gets to focus on what brings him purpose. What are the things he wants to allow his dollars to do? He started at 25, making $50,000 a year, just saying, hey, I have a plan in place. And now at retirement age 65, he has almost $6.4 million saved up, and he gets to choose what he wants to do, when he wants to do, the way he wants to do it, because he made the tough decisions.
And I think 29-year-old Manny, we talked about that at the beginning. If you watched the whole instead of just one of the highlights, didn't even have six figures. So I could see a lot of you when you write in comments, you're like, man, am I behind? That's why our net worth by age and our other series are so important to you guys, because you want to know how you compare to your peers. Mm-hmm. But here's what I would tell you. Stay on focus.
Mm-hmm.
Don't lose direction and focus on what your important incremental decisions need to be occurring. The small steps matter, because Manny at 29 with not even six figures, I don't think that there's a way that he could comprehend that he'd be worth over $6 million just a few short decades in the future. You too can do this. That's why I love creating content. If you ever want to know, well, all we do is we take a little, if you can understand your aptitude or talents that you're provided with the opportunities of learning these smart decision-making tools, anyone can do it. And that's why we talk about the abundance cycle. I want you to come learn these concepts, apply them to your personal life. You're going to see, if you'll just do that, learn and apply it, all of a sudden those small incremental decisions will start growing upon themselves in a compounding way, not a linear way, but a compounding exponential way, that you will become so successful that the abundance cycle will be fulfilled. And you will need a financial planner, a co-pilot, and we'll be right there waiting for you. This is why we get so much enjoyment. We couldn't do this. I wake up every morning, especially, I told my wife when I woke up this morning, I was like, it's show day. I get so excited about show days because I know we get to share this with you guys, and somebody's going to catch a clue today. You're going to get a light bulb that lights up in your head, just like when Mr. Morrow, my economics teacher, told me $100 a month would make me a millionaire when I was in high school. That's what the Money Guy Show is going to do for you today. So go check it out, moneyguy.com/resources. Download some of the free stuff that we're giving away. If you want to accelerate this even beyond that, go to learn.moneyguy.com. That's where the net worth tool that we covered a lot today, that's where you're going to get that. It's going to wake up even more and speed up your process. Thank you for all that we get to do. I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen. Money Guy team, out.